21 Virtual Summit. My name is Patty D, Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Cleveland. I will be lurking behind the scenes and hopefully working on my own technical issues. So far, I've had good luck today, unlike everybody else. But I encourage you to join us tomorrow. Promise we will have most of these bugs worked out. But I am going to turn it over to Dr. Scott Hardy, who will give us a presentation on the Cuyahoga River. Stay tuned.
Hello, everybody. I am trying to get my microphone to go a little bit louder here. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna make sure everybody can hear me. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm just going to talk as loud as I can here. So welcome. My name is Scott Hardy. I'm an extension educator with the Ohio Sea Grant College program. I'm coming to you from the campus of Case Western Reserve University, where I also teach in the Department of Earth, Environmental, and Planetary Sciences. Today I'm going to be talking with you all about the Cuyahoga River and efforts that have been made by a collaborative advisory committee, which advises the Ohio EPA and the Ohio Lake Erie Commission on all sorts of management actions that are in place to try to restore the river. When we talk about the Great Lakes, it's really an interesting kind of case study. As you can see from this picture, there are 2 countries, multiple states and provinces, and countless local actors that all play a role in managing this shared resource, or this common resource, if you will. Some kind of interesting Great Lakes facts for you all. The watershed surface is over 200,000 square miles. Think about that. It's absolutely huge. Water that enters the Great Lakes stays in there for anywhere between a couple of years to almost a couple hundred years. The population of the watershed is approximately 40 million people. So it's a huge area with lots of people, lots of different local actors, and a ton of water. Now, if you could turn the slide for me, Patty. Patty, turn the slide, please. There you go. Thank you. Okay, so in order to manage this shared resource, it takes a binational effort. So there's lots of work being done by both the governments of the US and Canada. Much of this effort falls under the purview of the International Joint Commission. For any of you that have never heard of the International Joint Commission, it was formed under the 1909 Boundaries Water Treaty. And really the goal is just to pursue some sort of common good, if you will, of both countries, and to serve as an independent, objective advisor on all sorts of issues dealing with the Great Lakes and water quality. One of the ways the International Joint Commission plays a huge role in water quality in the Great Lakes is through the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. Now, the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement was originally signed way back in 1972, but it was updated with an Annex 1, which was basically amendments, if you will, in 1987. And this was really important to our talk today because a part of these amendments that took place in 1987, what they did is established what we refer to as areas of concern. Now, areas of concern are basically just areas that have experienced extreme degradation throughout the Great Lakes. In total, there are 43 of these tributaries or areas that drain into the Great Lakes. Ohio has 4 of them. The Cuyahoga obviously is one, which is what we're talking about today. If we go west, we have the Black River and the Maumee River, and to the east is the Ashtabula River, which was recently just delisted. So they've been doing great work out on the Ashtabula. Now, this map shows all the areas of concern throughout the entire Great Lakes. So I already mentioned there's 43 of them. 26 are entirely within the United States, 12 are entirely within Canada, and 5 are shared by both countries. Now, the key to the areas of concern, or of our job as an advisory committee, is to try to remove what are called beneficial use impairments. So these beneficial use impairments are impairments to all sorts of, well, you guessed it, beneficial uses to the air or to the river. So things like fish and wildlife consumption, or eutrophication, undesirable algae. And I'll break some of these down and talk about them in a little bit more detail. Now, the Annex 1 of this Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement identified 14 potential beneficial use impairments that these areas of concern could show. Now, not all areas of concern have all 14 of these beneficial use impairments. The Cuyahoga River does not have all 14, for instance. But here is your list of all the possible beneficial use impairments. So things like restrictions on fish and wildlife consumption, tainting of fish and wildlife flavor, degradation of fish and wildlife populations, fish tumors, animal or bird deformities, degradation of benthos, restrictions on dredging, undesirable algae, restrictions on drinking water, beach clothing, closings, degradation of aesthetics, added cost to ag industry, degradation of phytoplankton, and loss of fish and wildlife habitat. If we focus just on the Cuyahoga River, these are the beneficial uses that we have been dealing with. You can take a look at what we have here in the Cuyahoga. So what I thought would be helpful today is if I sort of gave first a broad overview of the Cuyahoga itself, focus in on just the area of concern, and then we could go through some of these beneficial use impairments. And what I really want to focus on is what sort of actions have been taken to try to address or improve some of these impairments so we could achieve a greater overall water quality in the river. So this map shows the entire Cuyahoga River watershed. It's 85 miles long in total, and it kind of makes almost a U. You know, it starts going south and then wraps around and it almost comes up north again at the end. It drains a total of 800 square miles, or maybe even a little bit more, flows through all or part of 6 different counties. So this includes various municipalities, things like Cleveland and suburbs of Akron and Kent and Cuyahoga Falls. And it's just a huge area. Now, the Cuyahoga area of concern doesn't include the entire watershed. What we focus on is just the 46.5 miles of the Cuyahoga and all the tributaries draining into it. So this does certainly include basically from Akron all the way up to Lake Erie. It also includes the 10 miles of shoreline, basically from Edgewater Park to Euclid Park. And obviously every little tributary that drains into the river in this area. So this map you can see shows not only the Cuyahoga in white, but all the different colored little sub-watersheds that make up the Cuyahoga AOC. So you can see Big Creek and Tinker's Creek and Brandywine Creek, and all the different other little sub-watersheds that make up the area of concern. Now I mentioned that I'm part of a advisory committee that makes recommendations to the Ohio EPA and Ohio Lake Erie Commission on basically ways to sort of fix these environmental problems, if you will. You can see here all the different organizations and agencies that are part of the advisory committee. And it's really interesting. We have a fantastic group. I feel it's a somewhat diverse group that includes everything from industry to government agencies to environmental NGOs. And some of the folks that represent these organizations and industries are really some of the major players in not only river restoration, but environmental education or environmental restoration, land protection in general in the area. I threw this slide in there because I think it's important to understand how decisions are made. In this case, the International Joint Commission oversees all sort of Great Lakes actions, if you will. We are the AOC Advisory Committee, and we work really close with the Cuyahoga Soil and Water Conservation District. They are our facilitating organization. So any recommendations that we have for improving the river, we send on to the Ohio EPA and the Ohio Lake Erie Commission. And once approved there, they get sent on to the US EPA and then the International Joint Commission. Now, because a lot of this deals with very, I don't know, sort of targeted decisions and very important management actions to discuss, we have different subcommittees for strategic implementation and governance. And I work really closely with the outreach and education subcommittee. So that's part of my job today, is talking to all of you about what we do and why we're doing it and why it's so important. Now, remedial action plans really represent sort of this model of collaborative ecosystem management. These approaches are really sort of complemented, if you will. The federal government supports actions along the Cuyahoga with different types of resources, financial, technical, for instance. But the remedial action plans basically are put in place to address all of the impairments to these different beneficial uses. Now, an ecosystem-based approach is one that takes into consideration all different sort of socio-political and ecological considerations in a given place. So not simply we're going to look at just water quality, or not simply we're going to look at fish health, but instead we're going to take into consideration how all the different organisms intertwine and affect each other. So how any management actions will impact the entire river system. Once an area of concern has removed all the beneficial use impairments, then its designation as an area of concern could be what we call delisted. And that's our goal, to delist the Cuyahoga River area of concern. Now, this delisting process is kind of long. Basically, the Ohio EPA drafts recommendations. This has to go through different reviews and approvals. Eventually, the Ohio EPA does approve delisting. This goes on to GLENPO, that's the Great Lakes National Program Office. Eventually, the Ohio EPA and GLENPO finally approve a removal of a beneficial use impairment. There's public meetings to make sure the public does have a role or a voice. I feel this is critical. More participation in restoration actions, I feel, makes for a more resilient or more sustainable restoration of a river. And eventually then the final process would be for the BUI to be removed. Okay, so delisting. I use this word. Basically what this means is removing the area of concern from the list of Great Lakes areas of concern. And there's a couple different pathways to do this. Removing a single BUI from the AOC when the target for that BUI is reached in every single subwatershed. Remember I showed you that multicolored map with all the subwatersheds. Another way is removing a subwatershed from the AOC when all targets or all BUIs are met within that watershed. So this is more of a piecemeal approach, right? Where you can remove different parts of the AOC as long as every BUI in that area has been removed. Now, when all the BUIs have been met, or BUI targets have been met for all subwatersheds throughout the AOC, then we could delist the Cuyahoga River as an area of concern. I said there's 43 areas of concern. This figure shows you which areas of concern have already been removed and where we're at. The Cuyahoga is in the 2020 plus. So we certainly have a goal of being delisted as an area of concern in the next 5 years. There's no guarantee. Some of these restoration actions take time, and we are certainly doing our best to remove them in as expedient a fashion as we possibly can. Okay, so I mentioned that we started off with 10. We have already been able to remove 4 of them. So degradation of aesthetics, public access and recreation, restrictions on fish consumption, and eutrophication. Let's start here with restrictions on fish consumption. Basically what this means is by removing this beneficial use impairment, we are telling the public that they could eat fish out of the Cuyahoga River at the very same rate that they could eat fish for all other water bodies in Ohio. Now, every single, well, how could I word this? Whether you're in Lake Erie or the Cuyahoga River, the fish consumption guidelines should be the same. So if you were to go on the Ohio Department of Natural Resources website, there will be guidance for fish consumption in Lake Erie. Basically, this is 2 meals per week of yellow perch and sunfish, so like bluegills and such. 1 meal per week of all other fish not specified there. 1 meal per month for flathead catfish 23 inches and over, or northern pike 23 inches and over, as well as steelhead trout from all Lake Erie's and its tributaries. For me, this was really exciting. I love the idea that people could return to fishing on the Cuyahoga and could safely consume fish from the Cuyahoga River at the same rate that they consume fish from either Lake Erie or other water bodies in Ohio, unless otherwise advised by OEPA and ODNR. Next is public access and recreation, or public access and recreation impairments, if you will. Basically, this begs the question, are there enough opportunities for public access to the river and shoreline? So things like boating and fishing, scenic viewing and trails. And we've got approval that the answer is now yes. And there's been all sorts of great work done by different groups. The Cuyahoga River Water Trail, amongst others. Cleveland Metro Parks has played a big role. If you were to go down by Scranton Flats, across from Irish Bend there, next to the Merwin's Wharf, there's a really beautiful new public access point. So there's more and more opportunities for the public to get down to the river and get in the water. So this is very exciting. Another success story deals with aesthetics. For the aesthetics BUI, basically what we're asking ourselves is, are there regular instances of scum or sludge or really just other floating gunk that look or smell bad and cause nuisances? This doesn't include algae, of course, but we've made big strides in this area. I want to give a huge shout out to the Port Authority on this one. They've certainly, through the purchase of their 2 boats, Flotsam and Jetsam, that clean the water, they've certainly had a big impact on this BUI. Once those boats were launched and in service, the EPA basically expressed no further problems, if you will, for the aesthetics portion, or the aesthetics BUI. Our most recent BUI removal deals with eutrophication, which is just a real fancy word for algae. And basically the question we ask here is there too much algae on the water? Is there too much nutrients? Is there too little oxygen? Too persistent algal growth? The way that the algae BUI is dealt with is through source reduction, things like green infrastructure, bioswales, reductions in fertilizers or salt use, implementation of riparian buffers. All of these actions help reduce the amount of algae that could grow on the river's surface, or in this case, Lake Erie. That's actually I cheated a little. That's a picture of Lake Erie and my boss's hand right there. But this has certainly been an issue in the past on the Cuyahoga River, and we recently got approval to remove this BUI. So by removing these 4 beneficial use impairments, we've seen a real improvement in the Cuyahoga River. We've also seen not only healthier fish, more opportunities for people to fish, better water quality, more opportunities for people to use the water. We've seen people returning to the water, and it's really exciting. But we're not done yet. We still have 6 BUIs to remove. And I'll go real sort of quickly here through what they are and what we need to do in order to address each of these beneficial uses. Degradation of fish populations and fish tumors. I put these together because I feel they're kind of related. Degradation of fish populations. Basically, are there enough healthy, diverse fish communities? Right now, we know that only 3 out of 19 subbasins meet or exceed our targets. So we have some work to do. The question then begs, how do we address them? What action needs to take place in order to improve our fish populations? And really, it comes down to removing structural barriers or bypasses and improving habitat. And we know that this is already taking place. We've seen removal of several dams, especially within the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. They've been a great partner in terms of working to allow fish their natural passage through the Cuyahoga River. And we know that the Gorge Dam is next in line to be removed, which will take a huge investment and a lot of work. But once that's down, fish will have a clear passage all the way up the Cuyahoga. So we're hoping that once that takes place, we'll see real improvements in terms of fish populations. When we're talking about fish tumors and deformities, we're asking if fish have extra high levels of deformities, things like eroded fins or lesions or tumors. A few are okay, but not more than in areas outside the AOC. So whether you're in Lake Erie or any other tributary to the Great Lakes, you will see some fish with these deformities. But we want to make sure that all the fish in the Cuyahoga, that we don't see a greater amount than we do elsewhere. And really, this comes down to removing a lot of the contaminated legacy sediment in the river. Again, making great strides in this area. We're continuing to improve, and I certainly look forward to removing this in the future as well. Next is degradation of benthos. Benthos, so there's those little, oh, no, go back. There we go. Degradation of benthos. So benthos are those communities of little living organisms in the stream beds. And what we need to know is that there's a healthy, diverse population of these benthos. We know throughout the Cuyahoga AOC that 8 of the tributaries are really close. Unfortunately, 3 are not that close, and 8, we just don't have enough data. So for this, really what we need to do is just gather a heck of a lot more information. It takes time. You know, people have to get out there in the river and do the sampling. We're certainly working on it, and again, looking forward to address this in the future. Next are restrictions on dredging. Oh, there you go. And shout out to Share the River for this picture. I love that picture. Restrictions on dredging. So the question is the sediment dredged from the ship channel clean enough for open lake placement or upland use? Well, at this point, it's not clean enough for open lake placement, but it could be possibly reused in upland areas. So we're working to identify uses for this dredged sediment upland, where it could be beneficial, and how we could continue to basically find opportunities to reuse some of this stuff. Next are beach closings. Is it safe to swim or wade in the water? Well, we know that it's certainly not safe to swim after heavy rains. This is often due to combined sewer overflows. We see high levels of bacteria in the water after heavy rains. as well as other pollutants. In order to address this, we need to reduce things like waste, farm inputs, certainly fix faulty septic systems and discharges, and continue to reduce the volume of stormwater and combined sewer overflows. Again, a huge shout out to the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District for their efforts on Project Clean Lake, putting just an incredible amount of both financial and technical resources into storing some of that stormwater in large holding tanks, so it doesn't rush off through CSOs into the lake. Their dedication and effort is making a huge impact and huge improvement in this area. So I think we'll just continue to see improvements, and eventually I am very confident we'll be able to remove this BUI. For what it's worth, I saw that my friend Ari Rosser just posted a link to a dam removal story in the national parks. I mentioned that in order to improve our fish diversity through the AOC, it really comes down to removing those structural barriers. For those interested, it looks like there's some good reading material there. Thanks, Ari, for posting that. Okay, last but not least, loss of fish habitat. For this, we use what's called a QHEI metric, a qualitative habitat evaluation index. Basically, we know that right now, almost 75% of all the subbasins do reach this target, so this is good. Pond Brook, Little Cuyahoga need the most improvement, and really it comes down to just more habitat restoration. We know where the habitat restoration needs to take place. There's a lot of dedicated individuals working to restore habitat, and hopefully we'll continue to see improvements in that area. So, I sort of gave the very quick sort of rundown of all of this information today, but if you want to learn more about what's going on in the Cuyahoga AOC, you could certainly go to our website. We have all sorts of information on there, including sort of new news, anything that's happening up to date. You could look into the advisory committee, the not only plan for restoring all of these beneficial uses, but also our targets. You could check out the status of the different BUIs, some of our management actions, and we also have a resources page, which I think is vital. The resources page will tell you all sorts of different information that you can get to help get involved. We also have social media, so please like us on Facebook and follow us. Oftentimes we will hold public meetings. Our next public meeting is actually Monday, so if you are interested, it is virtual. You could go onto our website and find out how to join us. You could learn from all the advisory committee members what's going on and how to get involved. We also have a Twitter handle that you could follow for sort of up-to-date actions taking place. There you go. And if you have any specific questions for me, there's my email. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about the Cuyahoga River and all things going on with the area of concern. So that's all I have for my part of the presentation, but I'm hoping there's some questions, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that the audience has.
All right, thanks, Dr. Hardy. I still cannot hear you at all. So I'm trying my best with your signals here. I do have a couple questions that were sent to me privately, and I will post those in. So the first one up is, does winter salting on our roads impact the quality of our local streams and rivers?
That's a great question. The short answer is yes, right? I mean, anytime a sort of a foreign substance is being added to a system, an ecological system, and it's not native to that system, it doesn't belong there, it will have some effect, some ecological effect. The Cuyahoga River is not salt water, and it's not meant to be salt water. So yes, certainly winter salting can have an impact. That being said, I would argue that the size of the impact is really dependent on how much salt is that is put into the system. And I think in terms of the Cuyahoga, it flushes pretty quick. So because it's not still water, because it's not a lake, because it's a river and it flows, that I would argue that there would have to be one heck of a lot of road salt to have a huge impact. Now, most certainly, so if there's a lot of salt in a short period of time, it absolutely could have an impact on some species that aren't very salt tolerant. But I would like to believe that because the flow of the river is fast enough that it would flush itself out and it wouldn't have too huge of an impact. Now, in terms of Lake Erie, it's such a large water body, and because water does flow through the Great Lakes, so it's always kind of moving, that also would flush itself out. So is road salt good for the ecosystem? No, it's not. It's not native to the ecosystem. It doesn't belong there. But because water does move through the system quickly and dilutes quickly, I don't think it has a huge impact. And I think you could probably make a decent argument that our safety as motorists on the roads probably outweighs the minimal impact that road salt would have on this particular river ecosystem.
Great, thanks. Okay, next question. Have there been any interesting finds, such as like a return of a certain species as these BUIs are removed?
Oh, goodness, sure. I think just the return of lots of fish species to the Cuyahoga, to me, is super interesting. I mean, there's reports of people catching, walleye up the Cuyahoga. I'm an angler myself, so this is music to my ears. There's data out there on, the amount of fish species that were caught in the late 60s or early 70s. The Clean Water Act was passed in 1972 with the goal of making all American waterways fishable and swimmable. The amount of species that were detected in the Cuyahoga at the time was scary. It was so low. And so now we're seeing a lot more fish, and more fish that are, not exactly, I guess what I would call as a scientific term, weedy species. Weedy species are things like, cockroaches or deer or even humans, right? They can live just about anywhere. And fish, there are also some weedy species, some species of catfish that are very hardy, for instance. But when we're starting to see, walleye and even perch caught up the river, to me, that means the water quality is really improving on the water quality and the habitat structure. So yes, I'm very excited to see a lot of these species returning. I don't have, so that's my answer. Your quick answer is yes. We're seeing more and more species, and more of these species that to me are very exciting as sport fish. And I think we'll only continue to see not only greater diversity, but also greater numbers of these fish as water quality continues to improve. Good question. Thank you.
Kind of as a follow-up to that, do you have a particular species that you are hoping to see return?
I'm a big sturgeon fan. I would love to see a Great Lakes sturgeon in the Cuyahoga. I know there's some work being done to reintroduce them throughout the Great Lakes. I don't know much of what's going on with sturgeon in the Cuyahoga. There might be some folks who are also that are much more experts than I am on that. But if we see reports of that in the Plain Dealer, that would make me very excited. And I can see, by the way, to the road salt question.
Park Service is on this session as well. Ari, if you have anything you'd like to add, I believe you can ask permission to share audio and or video, and I can click you in. But if you're figuring that out, I will jump on to the next question.
Why are the dams being removed?
Why are the dams being removed? Well, as you know, in terms of the AOC, well, I'll just give more of a broad answer. Why are dams being removed? Dams basically inhibit the flow of the river. Now, this causes several problems. Obviously, it prevents fish from being able to migrate through their natural habitat. Dams also collect sediment behind them, which is not a good thing for several reasons. But in terms of restoring a river to its native sort of state, you know, we use the term in science ecosystem integrity. You know, integrity basically denotes the native state of an ecosystem. So for a river like the Cuyahoga River, its state of ecosystem integrity would be naturally flowing. Dams inhibit that. When a river is dammed, it can't flow in its natural state. So this not only has an impact on water quality, but natural habitat and fish diversity and health. So as dams continue to be removed, I think that is only a positive in terms of improving water quality, water flow, and ecosystem integrity.
Great, thank you. American Rivers named the Cuyahoga River of the Year for 2019. Why is this significant?
Well, the Cuyahoga, you may recall, is somewhat infamous for catching fire. You know, the last time was 1969. I believe it had caught fire over a dozen times before that. But the Cuyahoga catching on fire in 1969 certainly played a role in the passage of the Clean Water Act. And there was a few things going on at the time, but I think the pictures of a river on fire played a huge role in getting the public to tell their lawmakers, hey, this isn't right. You know, we want Congress to take action to reduce pollutants going into our water bodies and to invest in a cleaner, more healthy aquatic environment in our country. So that marked the 50th anniversary, you know, 2019 marked the 50th anniversary of the last time the Cuyahoga River caught on fire. So to me, the progress that the Cuyahoga River has made from 69 to 2019 is incredible. If you were to go downtown by the flats, you'll see people on paddle boards and in kayaks. You'll see restaurants where people are sitting, you know, waterside, enjoying food and drinks, or at Nautica listening to music. To me, the river really represents sort of a revitalization, not only of water quality, but also of community. So if the Cuyahoga could come back from catching on fire and being, you know, the butt of jokes to being the center of a city, and not only a place where people are drawn to for, you know, recreation, but also for, you know, spending time and entertainment. Wow, to me, what an incredible success story, not only of this river, but of water quality overall. I thought it was just an awesome story. I was really very proud to see the Cuyahoga win that award. I saw Myring just said that we went from 3 species of fish in the 80s to 76 species in 2018. So wow, what an incredible improvement in Cuyahoga water quality.
So Dr. Hardy, do you have a particular favorite spot along the river?
Oh, I got a lot of favorite spots. Oh goodness. I mean, to me,
now don't
anywhere...
divulge your secret fishing spots.
I won't. You know, I spend a lot of time sort of in the, you know, by Merwin's Wharf. So from sort of the Scranton Flats, Irishtown Bend, up through the flats. I spend a lot of time there. You know, so I'll take my kayak down there. And I love kayaking through the ship channel, you know, to see the huge ships pass through to me is really exciting. I love that, I grew up in Cleveland, right? So I remember being sort of young in the 80s and in the early 90s, and the Flats was sort of a ghost town. So to see all this development and all this entertainment is really exciting to me. I'm a huge live music fan, and Nautica is my absolute favorite place to see live music on Earth. So for me, that whole stretch to me is just really awesome. I love it down there.
Yeah, I'll help reiterate that point. I also Cleveland girl, born in the 70s, so I've seen some of the worst, and now it's just really remarkable. I had moved away myself for a decade and a half, and a lot of people are like, hey, where are you from? Because if you move to different parts of the country, apparently we talk funny. But every time I would say Cleveland, I would get ribbed. Oh, has your lake caught on fire? And I'd have to correct them. No, it was the river. And it's been almost 50 years, so get over it. But it is really remarkable to see the transformation that's happened here in Cleveland. And we're getting fewer and fewer of those nasty comments, and actually a lot of nice comments. I visited Cleveland, and it's a beautiful town, and it really is. But, maybe let's try to keep that a secret.
Well, we're seeing, this climate weirding, and more heat waves and forest fires out west, and more super storms along the Gulf. To me, there's no better place in the country to live than along the Great Lakes, and why not Cleveland?
Okay, I'm officially adding climate weirding into my lexicon. I love it. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. We are a bit early. I'm okay to end it as long as you are, or we can hang around if people want to start popping some questions in the chat if you're willing to hang around. I see we have some good comments coming in. With 22 million pounds of plastic trash flowing into the Great Lakes each year and the production of single-use plastic rising, is there a chance this new pollutant could hurt our chances of delisting as an AOC?
That's a good question. Amongst the 14 beneficial use impairments listed under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, there is nothing specific to plastic. I suppose that plastic could be lumped under degradation of aesthetics, but we've done a great job of that in the Cuyahoga. I mentioned the boats from Flotsam and Jetsam from the Port Authority. I'd like to think if there was a growing problem of floating plastic in the Cuyahoga, that those ships would take care of it, especially at least in the shipping channel. I personally don't see that as a future growing problem in the Cuyahoga. I think that would be more of an issue in Lake Erie itself. We certainly see, as Myring put in the chat there, microplastics in fish. But again, that's really not under one of the current beneficial use impairments. I do feel that plastic marine debris is a huge issue, and certainly one that is growing. But I do not see, just to be as clear as possible about your question, I do not see that impeding the potential to delist the Cuyahoga AOC in the future.
Thank you. Ari questions, what is the biggest stumbling block for delisting?
Ooh, Ari, you stumped me on that one. My goodness. Oh, goodness. What would trip us up the most? To me, a lot of it's just time. It takes time to measure. Yeah, see, it takes a lot of time to measure some of these issues. When we're talking about benthos, for instance, being able to measure These macroinvertebrate communities, that takes a ton of time and it takes a ton of data. Or, contaminated sediments, for instance. This takes time. And of course, as Myron mentioned in the chat, money. In order to improve fish diversity, to remove those impediments, those dams, that cost a ton of money. Now, we are fortunate. We have the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and I certainly encourage all of you to reach out to your lawmakers to encourage them to support it, because those are the types of things that can make a huge difference, right? But in order to implement dam removal or some of these large-scale habitat improvement projects, it takes time and money. So to me, those are really the biggest stumbling blocks. But we will overcome them, Ari. We will. I'm confident.
Fantastic. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat. Yes, Myron, thank you. Please reach out to your lawmakers. They are your voice. Okay, well, Dr. Hardy, thank you so much for your time today and your expertise. This was a great presentation. I look forward to hearing the recording and actually hearing you. So please stay tuned with us for tomorrow. We have a whole full day of wonderful sessions, and we will see you beginning at 9:30. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Hardy.
Thank you.